Good morning, Chair Fuller-Sveng. We're ready to begin.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the January 9th, 2026 regular meeting of the San Francisco Ethics Commission. Today's meeting is live cablecast on SF.gov.TV and live streamed online at sfgovtv.org/ethicslive. For public comment, members of the public may attend in person or may participate by phone or on the WebEx platform as explained in our agenda document. Clerk, can you please explain how remote public comment will be handled?
Certainly, Chair. Public comment will be available on each item on this agenda. Each member of the public will be allowed 3 minutes to speak. For those attending in person, opportunities to speak during public comment period will be made available here in room 400 at City Hall. For those attending remotely, the public comment period can also be provided via phone call by calling 1-415-655-0001 with access code 2660-381-6773, followed by pound and pound again to join as an attendee. When your item of interest comes up, press *3 to raise your hand to be added to the public comment line. Public comment is also available via the WebEx client application. Use the WebEx link on the agenda to connect and press the raise hand button to be added to the public comment line. For details and instructions on how to interact with the telephone system or WebEx client, please refer to the public comment section of the agenda document for this meeting. Public comment may also be submitted in writing and will be shared with the Commission after the meeting has concluded and will be included as part of the official meeting file. Written comments should be sent to ethics.commission@sfgov.org. Members of the public who attend this Commission meeting, including remote attendance, are expected to behave responsibly, respectfully. During the public comment, please address your comments to the Commission as a whole and not to an individual member. People who engage in name-calling, shouting, interruptions, foul language, or other distracting behavior may be excluded from participation.
Thank you, Clerk. I now call the meeting to order. Clerk, will you please call the roll under item 1?
Certainly. Commissioner Tsai?
Here.
Commissioner Ye?
Here.
Vice Chair Salahi?
Here.
Chair Flores-Feng?
Here.
Chair Flores-Feng, with 4 members present, you have a quorum.
Great. With that, I call agenda item 2, general public comment. Is there anyone in the room who wishes to give a general public comment? Any commissioner? Anyone in the queue, Clerk?
Chair, we're checking the queue to see if there's any callers. And there are no callers in the queue.
Okay, thank you. Hearing no further members of the public wishing to speak, this item is closed. I now call the consent calendar. Colleagues, as noted on the agenda, there will be no separate discussions on a consent calendar item unless a request is made by a commission member or a member of the public in attendance or in the queue, in which event the matter shall be removed from the consent calendar and considered as a separate item. If anyone wishes to speak on this item or move it out of the consent calendar, please let me know.
I'd like to pull the executive director's report. I just had a couple questions.
I think we should take public comment as well in case there's anything else. Is that right? Should we check the queue? I mean, we're going to take this out just in case.
Checking the queue?
Yeah. Thank you.
And there are no callers.
Okay. Do I hear a motion to adopt the consent calendar with the exclusion of the executive director's report, which we would move to a separate agenda item?
I'll move.
Second.
Okay. Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Certainly. On the motion to adopt the consent calendar after pulling the executive director's report, Commissioner Ye?
Aye.
Commissioner Tsai?
Aye.
Vice Chair Salahi?
Aye.
Chair Flores-Feng?
Aye.
Chair Flores-Feng, with 4 votes in the affirmative, the motion passes.
Great. So instead of moving to agenda number 5, I think we can move to this executive director's report question. And then I have an announcement about another agenda item. So we can proceed with that first.
Director Ford, thank you. I just had a question about the Form 700 filing issues that have been going on with the FPPC. Is that expected to impact this upcoming round of required filings, or is there any optimism about a potential resolution before then?
For the record, Pat Ford, Executive Director. Unfortunately, it will affect this year's annual Form 700 filing deadline of April 1st. And actually this week, Laura Mandler, our Acting Engagement and Compliance Manager, reached out to all of the affected filers directly, one-on-one, to just let them know and just to create that channel of communication in case they have any questions or concerns, we can field that. Because definitely when we let them know about this last year, we let them know that we were working on a solution and we hoped to have one in place by this time. And it's a little surprising to us that we weren't able to make any headway on this. To us, it seems like a pretty reasonable request that we've made to continue to administer our Form 700 filings and keep them here where they are used, as opposed to having them be vacuumed up into the state's antiquated system where they can't really be effectively used for the purpose they were designed for, which is to inform people in San Francisco of what the financial interests are of their elected officials and to make sure that we as a city can use that information to avoid conflicts. That's why we're continuing to make sure we have that information here, something that's been of great interest throughout city government to avoid conflicts and make sure we do not have them. We can't do that if we don't have the Form 700s of our top officials. So unfortunately, this situation persists. As I mentioned, we've notified all of the affected filers who also happen to be our top policymakers, so they're all aware. We're already working with the mayor's office on this issue. They've been great, hoping to also get our city's lobbyists involved to potentially lobby the state government for a change. I've been in touch with the city attorney. He's aware of the issue. He's been counseling us and is available to help us as well. So I think as a city, we are working together. I think people all understand the issue and are on board. They don't want this really important program to get damaged or fall away. So unfortunately, we'll have another season here of double filing. I want to say hopefully, again, this one will be the last, but I think it's really tough when you have a state law like this, and unfortunately when the state regulator hasn't really been working with us in the way that we would have hoped. So I don't have a great clarity at this moment as to what the resolution will be and when, but I can say that we're prioritizing it. It's really important, and to the extent any commissioners want to, work with us on this, would welcome that, but also happy to just, keep you in the loop, keep you updated.
Thank you. You also anticipated and answered my follow-up question about efforts to make sure people are aware of the dual filing requirement. Thank you.
Thanks.
Great. Is there any public comment on this item?
Chair Flores Fang, I'm checking the queue to see if there's any callers.
Thank you.
And there are no callers in the queue.
Okay. This is not a separate agenda item, but I'm going to close this item and proceed. So typically we would move on to agenda item 5, as I mentioned, but today we'll be moving agenda item number 7, the discussion and possible action regarding preliminary matters in the matter of Cheryl Davis, SFEC case number 25-838. We're moving it up only to continue it. And so please, Ms. Matthews, if you could come and share a little bit about that.
Good morning, Chair Flores Frank, Commissioners. B.C. Matthews, Director of Enforcement, for the record. Yes, so we had intended to present this matter for preliminary proceedings, but we have learned from Respondent's counsel that he's unavailable due to a jury trial that's actually starting today. He did communicate with us that he's not available throughout January. But just for the record, we have informed Respondent's counsel that we plan to move expeditiously on this matter, and we will continue to do so, including our plan is to request that a hearing be scheduled in this matter for March, if possible. So we're going to make that very clear. We believe that this is ample notice for Respondent's counsel and for Respondent to make arrangements to be available. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have on this. Otherwise, yes, we'll ask that this matter be continued.
I have no questions. Anyone else?
Okay.
Great, thank you. Should we take public comment? It's a continuance. I don't see why we would, but.
Yes, just.
Sure. Okay, great. Anybody in the room wish to speak on this item? Okay. You can go to the queue.
Chair checking the queue to see if there are any callers.
Thank you.
And there are no callers in the queue for this item.
Okay, thank you. We close this item. I now call agenda item 5, discussion and possible action regarding behested payment waiver legislation.
Thank you, Commissioners. For the record, Michael Canning, Policy and Legislative Affairs Manager. This item regards an ordinance that was introduced by President Mandelman and has been before the Commission in October as well as November, but was continued at both of those meetings for future consideration. The memo for this item provides some additional background context as well as an overview of a recent amendment added to the ordinance that is recommended by staff. To briefly review this rule and the timeline that created it, in 2020, in response to numerous investigations of corruption by city officials and those doing business with the city, both the Ethics Commission and the Controller's Office issued reports that recommended the city develop a prohibition for city officers that restricts them from soliciting behested payments from interested parties. In 2021, the Board of Supervisors enacted legislation that created this rule. Then in 2022, the voters approved Proposition E, which was placed on the ballot by members of the Board of Supervisors, which made 2 changes to the behested payments rules. It specified that if a contract would be approved by the board, the contractor in that case would be an interested party for the Board of Supervisors, even if the board was not a direct party to the contract itself. It also established the amendment requirements for this chapter, which specified that amendments need to be approved by a majority of the Ethics Commission and a 2/3 majority of the Board of Supervisors. A few months later, in 2022, after the passage of Prop E, the Board of Supervisors and the Ethics Commission approved an additional ordinance that added several exceptions to the behested payment rules and created the waiver provision that is the focus of the legislation before you today. To review, under the current law, the Board of Supervisors has the ability to grant behested payment waivers, grant waivers to the behested payment rules. If a waiver is granted by the board, the recipient of that waiver may then solicit payments from interested parties. These waivers cannot be applied retroactively. They can only be issued for a period of up to 6 months and must be documented in a database maintained by the clerk of the board. This law also includes a provision that prohibits the board from granting waivers to itself. The ordinance before the Commission today would change that provision so that the Board of Supervisors could approve waivers for members of the board as well as other city officials who work for the Board of Supervisors that would allow them to then solicit payments from interested parties. Since this ordinance was first proposed, staff have heard concerns and comments from the public opposing the ordinance, and to date the Commission has received more than 250 email communications in opposition to the ordinance. An example of those is provided in Attachment 3 to the memo. A key component of these objections is that there's a lack of transparency regarding how waivers are used once issued. To mitigate this concern and improve the overall transparency within the waiver process, staff have worked with President Mandelman's office to add a report back requirement to the ordinance, which is reflected in the copy in Attachment 1. This new report back requirement would require that all waiver recipients report back to the Board of Supervisors any donations to the city or a third party that were solicited under the waiver, and also be required to identify the donors, the amount of the donation made, the party that received the donation, and the interested party relationship between the donor and the party that solicited the donation. As discussed in previous meetings, staff do not find this ordinance would undermine the overall behested payment rule, largely given the very public nature of the waiver approval process. This process would be made even more transparent through the amendment added today, as all of the details around solicitations would become part of the public record with this change. Staff recommend the Commission consider the ordinance before you and vote to approve. If the ordinance were approved by the Commission today, it would then go back to the Board of Supervisors, where it would need a 2/3 vote to be enacted. If at that time or during that process the board were to make future amendments, the ordinance would need to come back to the Ethics Commission for additional approval. Thank you, and I'm happy to take any questions. There's also a representative from President Mandelman's office here to speak as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hello. President Mandelman is also on his way in case you have specific questions for him. I just wanted to say we did work very closely with Michael and Kathleen on an amendment that would add a reporting requirement to this legislation, an additional reporting requirement that would allow for, within 60 days, a report to the Board of Supervisors. I believe you all have the copy of that amended version, but we are happy with this. We are thankful for Michael and Kathleen and all of you for working on this with us. And again, if you have specific questions for us, he will also be here in a second, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I think we probably do. So I do want to acknowledge and commend you all for negotiating and engaging, over the past couple of weeks about this. I know that we mentioned we had some concerns during the meeting that we shared with you all, and I know that the public has been very vocal about it. So it's good that you've been incorporating that feedback. It's very encouraging to see. I think the last time you were here, I asked about examples of things that that you couldn't do, but for this waiver. You shared some examples that I think we helped clarify that those examples weren't necessarily on point, and then I think you'd come back with more. And so I think it's just very important because of how uncomfortable I think this change is for a lot of people, to know why it's necessary. Like what good does it bring? Like if you could give some tangible examples, I think it'd be helpful for all of us to know.
Yeah, I mean, when he gets here, I will let him give you the tangible examples, but I think in our experience, this one restriction, every other, elected official, mayor can have the ability to get a behested payment waiver. He feels like this one limitation, this is a very transparent process for behested payment waivers. It obviously goes to a committee, goes to the full Board of Supervisors. This is a very clear way for the public to see what that behested payment waiver is getting solicited for. So he feels like, I can, again, have him give you the specific examples, but this one restriction against the Board of Supervisors feels a little odd because this is such a transparent public process. And I understand the board is the one approving the waiver, but again, it does take 10 additional supervisors to be looking at it, in addition to the person that is getting the waiver granted for them. So again, I hope he can come here and give you more specific examples to your question, but that's kind of how he feels this is a very odd exception given how public that this process is.
Great. Yeah, we can ask more specific questions. And I would just say in response to your comment that everybody else gets to do it doesn't mean that we necessarily have to do it here. But that's very helpful, and happy to revisit this when he's here.
I have a couple of questions as well, maybe equally to both staff and yourself. So thank you both for being here. One relates to the new reporting requirement, which I'm glad to see in there. But I think part of the intention was to cover the gap left by the Form 803s. And I just had a question about the difference in timing requirements. My understanding is under the 803, it's within 30 days of meeting the donation threshold. And here it's within 60 days of the expiration of the waiver. So we're potentially looking at an 8-month delay from the time a 6-month waiver is granted before there's reporting of anything that doesn't fall within the 803 requirement.
Speak a little bit to the Form 803 is a bit of a challenging reporting schedule in that the way it works is that the official first kind of reports it to their own office. So like the mayor's office, when there's a payment, they have 30 days to report it to the mayor's office, and then there's an additional 30 days before they will forward a copy of that to the Ethics Commission, which is also a process. There's currently state legislation to maybe change that process and let those be filed electronically directly with filing officers like the Ethics Commission. Yeah, so there would be a longer period that, potentially it could be 8 months if the waiver was granted for the full 6-month period. However, there would need to be, some period afterwards. Otherwise, like, it couldn't happen immediately because the solicitations wouldn't have happened yet. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so I think that is a correct breakdown that, like, at the maximum, it could be could be 8 months, but that would be 2 months from the time no more solicitations could be occurring under the waiver. And I think the 2-month period is largely designed to make sure that folks have enough time to document and prepare that written submission.
Is there any reason why the 60-day deadline couldn't run from when a behested payment is actually made? That's been solicited, not the solicitation, but the actual payment, as opposed to the end of the waiver period?
That might result in many, numerous filings happening. Instead, I think the way it would work as written is there would be sort of one waiver, one following report, how this waiver was used. With a model like that, it could be one waiver, and then if 6 or 10 payments were solicited, they'd all have different things to be filed. That could work, but I think it would just add more filing for the board to receive and for the recipient to issue and keep track of, instead of one holistic report at the end.
Back to your question, we can.
Oh, yeah. Hi.
What's up, everybody? What's going on?
Good morning. Good to have you here with us. I was just asking your colleague about some tangible examples as to why we need this waiver. I was saying, this has brought some discomfort to a lot of people. We are getting a lot of comments. And I think for us and for the public to be able to see that, but for this change, we wouldn't be able to do X, Y, Z, which is good for everyone. I think it'd be
I think that the challenge with the behested legislation is that it creates this uncertainty around soliciting contributions for important causes. I don't think anybody wants or feels like it is appropriate to go out and seek a contribution from an interest or an entity that has business before the Board of Supervisors. I don't think that is something that we should do, and I think that if that is reported, that is going to be embarrassing. But I think there are thousands of matters that come before the Board of Supervisors over the course of a year, and the fact that somebody is a board member of an organization, or that there's some relationship that may well be forgotten by the particular supervisor or the elected official who is soliciting the contribution, creates this uncertainty about whether there should be any private fundraising for important causes. And so we're in an environment where the city has fewer and fewer funds. I am the gay supervisor for District 8, which includes the Castro. We are seeing LGBTQ serving nonprofits losing funding and under threat with the new challenges in the era of the Trump administration. And the ability to, if I'm approached by an actor that I don't think I have any particular connection to, who is interested in contributing, I would like the ability to say, well, there is this, Larkin Street is an organization that is providing shelter and services for queer youth who are fleeing, places where it's not okay to be out. Or a host of other, open house, which provides services to queer seniors. And that's my little example, because my little chunk of the world that I think I'm responsible for or uniquely responsible for is San Francisco's queer community. I also know my neighborhoods, the Castro, these are the neighborhoods I represent. And if somebody has funds, or a company, a person wants to make a contribution or might be interested in supporting some useful activity, community center, neighborhood gardening project, whatever it is, I would like to, on the front end, be able to ask for a waiver for a particular thing. The thing that I would likely ask for a waiver for is fundraising for queer community serving nonprofits and organizations doing things related to HIV. That is probably the thing that I would say. I would like to have this little protection so that I do not unwittingly violate the behested payment ordinance. And if there's a problem, particularly with the changes that you are contemplating around reporting on the back end, whether Supervisor Mandelman did or did not solicit from somebody that is actually embarrassing should come out.
Thank you. That's helpful.
All right. Thank you.
Through the chair, if I could maybe add something too that I think President Mandelman was referring to but didn't expand on, which is that Proposition E, which voters approved, I think at this point it's been about 4 years ago. It expanded how the behested payment rule applies specifically to the board. And the rule has a broader application to members of the board than it does for all other Form 700 filers. For all other Form 700 filers, it applies to you specifically for city contractors if that entity is contracting with your department, which is a much narrower universe for those filers to keep track of. But for the board, it applies not only to entities contracting with the board, although I don't think there are a ton of those, but also to all contracts that the board approves. And as you know, city law requires the board to approve contracts over a certain threshold. It could be over $1 million, over a 10-year term. There are other things the board has to approve. So it is a pretty broad set.
Right now, I believe it's 100,000.
100,000. So it's a pretty large set. And I think that's what President Mandelman is referring to with it's hard to keep track of, which we understand that. I won't question the policy judgment of Prop E. That was a ballot measure that the Board of Supervisors placed on the ballot. The voters approved. The Ethics Commission wasn't formally part of that approval path. So I think we can just accept that policy as is. But I think it is important to keep in mind that for the people affected by this legislation that we're talking about today, who are members of the board, that they do have kind of a unique situation or burden from this rule. And that's something that we've also been kind of weighing as we go through this.
Also very helpful. Thank you.
And another point of clarification for me, I think, here is that some of the suggestions that we've received have said that it wouldn't be too burdensome to search a database to figure out before a request is made. But as I understand it, in practice, these are not necessarily concerted efforts to go out and fundraise for particular campaigns, but the idea may just come up in some other context. Could you share a little bit more about how these initiatives actually work?
Sometimes people do actually, want to make a contribution in some way and want the guidance of elected officials because theoretically we know our communities, we know the needs. But even if it were a concerted, I sit down, and I think the way this would actually work is I solicit this waiver because I think I see queer organizations getting defunded in the city budget, and I want to go raise some money so that LGBT Center can continue doing work with people seeking job training, or a housing organization has some funds to do some housing-related work, or whatever it is. I'm not aware how I would find the thousands and thousands of potential behested problems, and so I just don't know how you do that. How you do that search, and I think. You could put your staff on going through every single agenda and then trying to figure out. I think board membership is an issue. So I think there's a lot of actors you would be looking for, and I think the likelihood of missing is pretty high. And I think then you make a decision am I going to go ahead and do this and take the risk without a waiver and know that somebody can come after me, or do the politicians decide to take themselves out of the game and just not do that kind of fundraising? In my view, it would be better to have the politicians doing that kind of fundraising because I think they're uniquely positioned to know both the needs and the people, organizations, entities, companies that might have some ability or interest in helping to meet that need.
Thank you.
I had a question for maybe it's best directed towards Mr. Canning. I just want to understand the history of the legislation that was helpfully laid out in the memo, but I'm looking at page 2. So am I correct that before Prop E, in the legislation that the board passed in 2021, that behested payments were prohibited altogether?
No. So in prior to basically Prop E was very narrow. It just changed the kind of element that we've been talking about, where if there are contracts that the board approves but is not a party to, saying that those are also interested parties. It changed that, and then it changed the amendment provision. That was the only thing Prop E did. The provision existed the same as it did with Prop E prior to that.
So what was the state of what was permissible in 2021?
2021. So I guess prior to 2021, the initial, the legislation before Prop E, there was a Hested payment reporting requirement that required city officials to file a report when they were making soliciting payments from interested parties. And the change with the legislation prior to Prop E was to make that a prohibition instead of a disclosure requirement for interested parties.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Canning, I have another question. After the reporting, what requirement is there for the commission to look at any of that reporting? Is there any requirement?
With the report back added
Yes,
to this ordinance,
exactly.
there's no formal process for the Ethics Commission to review it after the fact. That's definitely something that like staff could monitor, but wouldn't be statutorily required that the commission review it.
In what theoretical instances would the commission review that report then?
I think there'd probably be something that the policy division would monitor, like we currently keep an eye on the Hested payment waivers that are approved by the board and look at them and what's changing and how frequent they're being issued and kind of monitor that. I think that would probably be something, especially if the commission expressed an interest in, having that be monitored, something that we could do.
And how would you know if there was a red flag?
How do you define red flag in terms of?
Yeah.
Yeah.
How would you know there would be a red flag?
Well, I mean, I guess the requirement would be that the interested party relationships be identified in the report back. So the public as well as the Ethics Commission would be able to look at that and, see, are a lot of kind of problematic solicitations being made under these waivers? Is that a rationale for future policy change? And then there would, I guess, be the other issue, which would probably be more of an enforcement matter. If a waiver was issued and something wasn't reflected in the report back, that could be a potential grounds for an investigation as to this was solicited from an interested party, it wasn't reported on the report back. That could be a violation.
Because that was something I was thinking about earlier. We do have the guardrails. I mean, we recognize that it's a very public process. I would imagine that the staff and like the enforcement division has like a list of go-tos or like places, like a priority list of places that where they usually find certain violations. And to the extent there is a list like that exists, like if this could be added to the list of like places to look for potential red flags or issues, I would prefer that. And so if we do have to come up with a more like structured framework for, how this gets before us or, how we see any red flags that come up, happy to discuss that or discuss a process. But I do think that this is like a good opportunity, like given the context of how this was passed and the concerns around it, something that we should just keep an eye on.
Yeah, I think we could definitely do that. Another thing I would add to what Michael said in response to Commissioner Tsai's question is we could also do proactive enforcement work to ensure that the behested payments that are reported in the report back are in fact within the scope of the waiver that was issued. Or did people go and make solicitations that they actually had not gotten permission to make? That would be a violation as well. So that's something that we could bake into our annual cycle of proactive enforcement work, is to just go and look at those, just like we do for Form 700s. We go and look for conflicts of interest, and we proactively look to make sure commissioners aren't contracting with the city. And we've caught instances of that. So this could be another thing. We could just have a regular enforcement cycle of going through and just scanning these, seeing if there's any violations that are apparent on its face, and then coordinating with policy to see, like, is this working? Probably working with President Mandelman or other folks on the board at times in the future iterations of the Board of Supervisors to see, like, is this working for them? Do we need to change this?
A few questions, and some of these stem from my ignorance of how the various mechanisms for amending legislation happens. But am I right? It's fair to say that what we are being asked to vote on today affects what was enacted in Prop E. Is that correct, Mr. Canning?
Not really. The waiver provision was added after Prop E. In Prop E, there was no waiver provision. It was the legislation that was approved 3 or 4 months after Prop E was approved by the voters that created several exceptions and defined some terms and created the waiver provision, and that was enacted by or jointly approved by the Commission and the Board.
Was there ever a period when behested payments were prohibited altogether?
From non-interested parties, like from any person, or
At all, yeah.
No, there was never a time when Form 700 filers or any other subset of city officials were just flatly prohibited from asking people to give money to other people. We never had a rule that broad. The first rule we ever had was the one that was created in 2021 that said you can't ask for behested payments from interested parties, and it defined what that universe of people are. That was the first time there was actually a prohibition on behested payments. Prior to that, there was only 2 sets of reporting requirements, one of which is under state law and still exists. So that was kind of the big sea change was in 2021. The controller recommended that the city adopt a prohibition. The commission had explored it previously before the corruption scandal happened, before that came out in 2020. So then when the controller recommended it, then we reopened that as a policy project, worked with the board and created it. But it was always pegged only to interested parties. It was never just a flat prohibition on asking anyone to make charitable donations.
And is it accurate that the impetus for that in 2021, the corruption scandal, was more related to requests for donations to things like staff parties and holiday parties and outings rather than to independent nonprofit organizations?
Yes, absolutely. And I think we may have had some discussion about this in the last meeting too, that it was really the behested payments that had no clear public benefit that I think really attracted a lot of concern in the public. Things like staff parties or contributions to these mysterious slush funds. For example, there was the account that was held at the Parks Alliance that various city officials had control of, and it wasn't clear what the funds were used for. Those were the ones that were really at issue, were the solicitation of city contractors to give money to I think it was the Lefty O'Doul's Little League Foundation that was actually then being used to fund holiday parties. So I think those are the kinds of behested payments that probably would not get approved if a waiver was asked. I think the board would be asking the requester, why do you want that? What is the purpose for that? And those would hopefully get screened out of the process.
My take on it is I think there have been a lot of valid concerns expressed, but I think we've struck the right balance here. It seems like the main thing we want to make sure is that we're not facilitating a pay-to-play scheme under the surface, and there are appropriate transparency checks here that allow both the commission and the public to keep an eye on that. One concern I have is that the amendments we make today may be very difficult to reverse if it turns out that this becomes a problem down the line. And I'm wondering if there's any thought been given to something like a sunset or renewal provision after a couple of years have passed for us to just make a conscious effort to revisit whether or not any red flags have actually come up to reauthorize.
I don't think we've yet looked at that. I'd be curious if the city attorney's office has thoughts on the mechanics of that, if we could do it. But aside from whether we could do it, it's not something we have looked at or discussed yet with President Mandelman's office. Be curious to get their thoughts as well.
Sorry, and I think that's something I'm going to have to follow up with offline. I don't have any thoughts in the moment.
Curious, President Mandelman, if you have any thoughts about that.
Sunsets are usually reasonable. So as long as there's
long enough period.
a long enough period to see how this is working, and if it is a problem, revisit it. I have no objection to that.
Unless anyone else, none of the commissioners. Any public comment? Anyone in the room who wishes to speak on this item?
No, the speakers.
Okay. Can you hear me now? Okay. Is there any public comment? Okay. Welcome back.
So thank you. My name is Carla Kincaid Yoshikawa. Can you hear me? I am a resident of the Sunset District, and I've been a volunteer with the California Clean Money Campaign, but I'm here today as a citizen of San Francisco. Our own common sense, research, and the advice of experts who have been involved in ensuring fair elections processes and practices all tell us that waivers to the ban on behested payments introduce loopholes for the resurgence of pay-to-play graft and corruption. We made a little bit of progress with Prop E. It has since been weakened, and this weakens it further. For those who say the proposal can provide increased support for worthy causes, keep in mind that the current law does not ban soliciting behested payments in most cases. It only bans solicitations from entities doing business with or seeking approvals from the city. The cost of vetting these is part of the cost of democracy. In other words, solicitations that would be most inclined to involve pay-to-play agreements are banned. The mission of the Ethics Commission is to practice and promote the highest standards of integrity in government by delivering impactful programs that promote fair, transparent, and accountable governmental decision-making for the benefits of all San Franciscans. Further, it states that public service is a public trust, and the Commission's aim is to ensure that San Franciscans can have confidence that the operations of the city and county and the decisions made by its officials and employees are fair, just, and made without any regard to private or personal gain. This proposal does none of that. You, as commissioners, took an oath to uphold the public trust, and I would say to advance the official mission of this commission. If you can't clearly and honestly explain how this proposal advances and supports the mission and upholds the public trust, you have an obligation to vote against it. So when you cast your vote, if you vote in favor of this proposal, we have the right to demand today that you clearly explain how this proposal aligns with the Commission's mission, advances governmental ethics, and protects against conflicts of interest in our political processes. Are you willing and able to do that? I'm asking. Okay.
Thank you for your comments.
Hello, I'm Carol Badger, resident of San Francisco, and a volunteer with California Clean Money. And we're shocked that San Francisco government wants to undermine voters who demand to end the pay-to-play in their Prop E. Additionally, supervisors failed to explain why donations are needed from the very same parties wanting to secure government contracts, permits, or monetary relief. And lastly, I think even if you put these, the feedback in a database, from the California Clean Money Campaign experience from the Disclose Act, people don't pay attention. They only pay attention to the bottom line. And I think they're pretty sick and tired of the contributions and the dark money. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
First, I want to say thank you for your work of many years. I have been in San Francisco since '83, and it's hard for me to come down here and leave my work and come and do this for free. When they say it's transparent, I don't have time to be reading all this stuff. I can barely get a chance to read a relaxing book. San Franciscans deserve to know that public officials are making decisions based on their best judgment, not on behalf of large corporations and special interests. When city officials raise money from entities who stand to benefit from their actions, their duty to the public is impaired. I just think that this is making it so complicated for citizens to keep track of, and we want you guys to do it, and we need it to be sort of simple and clean.
Thank you for your comments.
Hi, my name is Karen Franklin. I, too, have been living in San Francisco since 1983, been protest, activist. I'm a retired teacher, artist, writer. I'm totally opposed to this amendment. I appreciate the effort for transparency, but I don't want my supervisors going out and fundraising. That's not their job. I live in the Tenderloin. We have so many issues there. I want my supervisor focusing on that. There are means for nonprofits to give to various organizations should the need arise. We don't need our supervisors going out and making those kinds of connections. That's not why I elected my supervisor. Yeah, maybe there's something a little funky about this legislation that sticks out. Well, gee whiz, deal with it. You know, we don't need to pass an amendment, pass a proposition by 70% of the voters. You're getting over 200 people contacting you in opposition. We're taking time off of work to come back and say, just follow the will of the voters. Trust the voters. We know what we want. We know what we're talking about. We don't want our supervisors giving themselves the right to waive legislation for whatever reason. I'm sure there are many good ones, to fundraise. If the issue comes up, just say, hey, you want to give money, contact them directly. I can't do it. Super simple. If there's a need in the LGBTQ community, I'm all for that, but you don't need to be involved in it. That's not your job. So that's the other thing I wanted to point out was Prop E doesn't stop officials from fundraising for most nonprofits. It only bars solicitation from contractors and lobbyists. Okay, time's up. Thank you. Please vote
ma'am, you still have 30
opposition.
seconds.
Excuse
You still have
me?
30 seconds.
Oh, yay. So Prop E doesn't stop contractors or developers from giving to good nonprofits. It's all still there. It's all possible. Charities can still ask them to donate directly themselves. So whatever concern you had about funding, just go talk to them yourself, right? All right. Please vote against this. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your comments.
So my name is Esther Marks, and I'm speaking as an individual. All the comments made, I think, clearly shows that you should vote against this proposal. And I just wanted to restate, Proposition E does not stop officials from fundraising for most nonprofits. It only bars solicitation from contractors and lobbyists with business before the city. So that's very important to remember. Also, Prop E doesn't stop contractors or developers from giving to nonprofits. The charities can still ask them to donate directly themselves. What's prohibited is the inherent conflict of interest when a supervisor is the one asking the contractor or developer whose projects they will vote on. So again, it's very simple, I think. And it very clearly explains why you should vote against this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Anyone else in the public sitting in the room today? Okay, can you check the queue, please? Thank you.
Chair Flores-Feng, we're checking to see if there's any callers in the queue who wish to comment on item 5. And it looks like we do have one caller. We'll give it a moment for them to connect.
Hello, this is David Schmidt. Can you hear me?
Yes, David. Thank you. Go ahead. Your 3 minutes starts now.
Thank you. I've been a San Francisco resident for more than 50 years, and I'm a volunteer with the California Clean Money Campaign. Why are we here today? Because back in 2020, the state controller published a public integrity review of pay-to-play politics in San Francisco and found that behested payments from interested parties present a high risk of corruption. That has not changed. Though we appreciate the proposed amendment to increase transparency about which special interests are asking for behested payments, it's not enough. Very few people will even see those reports. Voters voted 70% to put this prohibition on solicitation of behested payments into the law. We should keep it. We've seen scandal after scandal tied to behested payments from city contractors. They're corrupt. They're unethical. Every Ethics Commission member should vote this thing down. It would open the door to conflict of interest corruption. We shouldn't let the Board of Supervisors decide for themselves when they have to follow the law and when they don't. It's just an invitation to corruption. After the fact transparency is not enough to prevent it. So please vote against this. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Chair Flores-Feng checking the queue to see if there's any additional callers that would like to comment on item 5.
Thank you.
And there are no additional callers.
I'm wondering, Kathleen, if I'm able to ask some follow-up questions to Supervisor.
Yes,
President
that's fine.
Mandelman.
He's appearing as part of this agenda item.
So just, a quick follow-up to we've heard some comments here today. To the point that, you're not supposed to go out there and fundraise, people can talk to each other, you don't need to be a middleman. Can you respond to that?
I think there's legitimate policy disagreement about whether elected officials as elected representatives of their communities should be involved in private fundraising. But the city has never said that we should not. What the city has done and has given the voters to, when in fact most of the public commenters asserted that they were not trying to take away the ability of elected officials to fundraise. The structure that has been put in place, however, is one that makes it risky and concerning for any elected official who wants to try to stay on the right side of the law to actually engage in that activity. And so there's a choice then about whether to solicit donations for important causes, knowing that in so doing you very well could violate the rules. I don't want to be in the position of having to make that choice. I don't want my colleagues to have to be in the position of having to make that choice. And the reality is that the controversies and corruption that gave rise to San Francisco's unique efforts to regulate behested payments did not come and were not related to corruption at the Board of Supervisors. And yet the members of the Board of Supervisors are uniquely barred without a possibility of waiver that was preserved for the very elected officials and departments that had engaged in the corruption. So I think this was a mistake, a bad policy choice, something that my predecessors, if I voted for this, I regret it, but that really I think this was a deal between former President Peskin and the mayor, and I think that former President Peskin made a mistake in giving up the Board of Supervisors' ability, the members of the Board of Supervisors' ability to solicit behested payments with a waiver.
Thank you. Okay. I think public comment is still open. So.
I think not.
Sorry, give me 1 second before I. Can you say that again?
I think if we give more public time to somebody who's already spoken, we have to give the same to everybody. So.
Okay, that's. I agree with you.
Sorry.
We're talking about how much time to share or to now give people who've already presented a comment.
I think that because you did get some additional information, I think that providing additional time would be appropriate.
Okay. An additional 3 minutes.
I think so.
That works for me. Thank you. Okay.
I don't believe any of us said that we were thinking that we wanted our supervisors or our elected officials to be fundraising, or we were going to ban them in their own way, but for private things and for things that are okay, we're not asking to extend it. Although I think that the ban on this kind of fundraising for things where there's a special interest should be extended to other positions, to other city officials, not retracted. So, and I don't like having our words twisted to say something we didn't mean. Thank you.
I would also like to add that the supervisor did not provide any compelling reason how this benefits society, how it protects society. I feel that it is more personal, that they're having their hands tied feels uncomfortable, and they want the freedom expressed by the one supervisor to be able to go out and solicit donations. But I did not hear any reason from him as to how this is going to help the city as a whole, how this is going to protect voters, how any of this is going to do what the commission is assigned to do, which is protect the interests of the voters and the city of San Francisco. I get nobody likes limitations on their freedom. It comes with the job. You know, if you don't like it, maybe don't run for supervisor. All right, thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
There was also a request by the director, Mr. Ford, to speak in behalf of the commission retaining their ability to go directly to the voters, which I had mentioned before that Paul Malbestad, former Commissioner Paul Malbestad, who couldn't be here, that's how we got public finance, was he could not get the members of the Board of Supervisors to put it on the ballot, and so the commission had to put it on the ballot. And anyone who's been involved in, campaigns knows it was a very important, creating public finance was a very important position. And by the same token, I agree that I don't know why, rather than allowing the Board of Supervisors to make behested payments without the waiver, why other public officials, why you can't go to the ballot and ask that other public officials should not be able to do that also, because the same rationale is true. It sets up a system where you can have potential corruption, and that's not something that I think you want or that is part of your mission.
Thank you for your comments.
Great. And I know that we have a caller in the queue.
Yes, we have one additional caller. Give us one moment so they can connect.
Hello, name is Sean McMorris. I'm with California Common Cause. I'm writing in and calling in opposition to this ordinance. We appreciate the additional transparency amendments that have been proposed, but ultimately they do not fix the problem, and it goes against the will of the voters. And so we're asking you to oppose this ordinance. However, we're happy to work with the supervisors and the commission on amendments that would prevent inadvertent violations. We have proposed some ideas, if that is the concern here. But ultimately, this is money in politics, and it's not being used for campaigns, but it's money that is being solicited from a politician who is in a position of power, and it is being asked of people who need something from them or have something and want to sustain that thing. And I'm not implying that any supervisors have any ill intent, and the fact that some of these contributions go to good causes, that's fine, but that's not, the ends don't justify the means. It does create an environment where people who do seek entitlements from the city feel an obligation to give, and it also creates an environment where supervisors feel like they can solicit better, more often from people who have interest with them. So for all of those reasons, we ask you that you don't move this ordinance forward, but we're happy to work with you all on finding some solutions to prevent inadvertent violations and more transparency. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. Chair Flores-Fan, we're checking the queue to see if there's any additional callers that want to comment on item 5.
Thank you.
And there are no more additional callers.
Okay, thank you. I think.
Yeah, through the chair, if I could maybe suggest a process. There was discussion about a possible amendment to the legislation. It might be a good idea for you to call for a recess in the meeting so that the city attorney's office can have a moment to just look at that and see if that is possible. And then the city attorney's office could advise you about what your options are during this meeting. But I think it would be good to pause so that our deputy could have a moment while the meeting is not taking place. She's not watching the meeting, so she could do the work she needs to do to see if that's possible.
Sure.
It may be, it may not be, but I think giving her a moment would be
Yeah,
good.
that sounds great. I was actually going to request that we continue this to the next meeting, but if this is something that you could provide, council, you could provide today, that'd be fine too.
Yes, if we can take a brief recess, I can provide some guidance today about
Yes.
what options you have.
Yep, that works. Okay, so I will call a recess. See you all soon.
Chair Flores-Feng, we're ready to begin.
Great. Thank you, everyone, so much for your patience while we were out on recess. We are now ready to proceed with a motion. Or does anyone have a specific motion they'd like to advance?
Yeah, I'd like to move to adopt this proposal subject to the addition of sunset provision that would apply specifically to the provisions that now allow the Board of Supervisors to vote on waiver requests for their own members of a period of 3 years. And I just wanted to reiterate as part of that motion that I think there are really compelling arguments that have been made on both sides of this issue, and there are important issues at stake. I think the current language balances the importance of having effective ethics rules and protections in place with the need for public transparency around the activities of supervisors on solicitations of this nature. But because there is some anxiety amongst some of the commissioners, but also the public, around the potential for impropriety, a sunset provision may give us the opportunity to, that automatically expires that provision for the supervisors, gives us all the opportunity to revisit this in a few years' time and see how things have played out. So that's my motion.
Yeah, I'd like to second that also with just a comment that I'm very grateful for everybody who's shown up today, taking time out of their day for public comment. It's been very helpful, at least for me, to understand the impact. I mean, all of our decisions are very weighty every time we come here. We understand that, but it's been very helpful to hear from all parties. And so I do think that the sunsetting provision, I mean, we haven't drafted it, but I think this provision will help us. I think it puts everybody on notice that this is something that it's a tough call. We're happy with the language, but we are watching because we understand, the potential risk that this comes with. So I second with that context. And I think you can call the roll.
All right, we'll call the roll. Thank you. On the motion to adopt the behested payment waiver legislation with the addition of the 3-year sunset period, Commissioner Tsai?
Aye.
Commissioner Ye?
No.
Vice Chair Salahi?
Aye.
And Chair Flores-Feng?
Aye.
With 3 votes in the affirmative, Chair, the motion passes.
Okay, we now close this item. I now call agenda item 6, discussion and possible action regarding proposed stipulation, decision and order in the matter of Godfried Massind.
Good morning, Chair Flores-Feng, Commissioners. For the record, my name is Eric Willett, investigator with the Ethics Commission. The matter before you today in this agenda item is a stipulated agreement between the Commission and Dr. Godfried Massind. Dr. Massind is the director of the Public Health Lab at the Department of Public Health. As detailed in the stipulation, the Public Health Lab held a holiday luncheon during the 2023 holiday season at a restaurant here in San Francisco that was paid for by Abbott Laboratories Incorporated, a restricted source. This event was primarily coordinated by Dr. Massind, who sent invitations to his staff via email to attend this event. As the stipulation describes, although Dr. Massind himself did not attend the event, he was responsible for causing other city employees to violate the restricted source rule when they attended the luncheon paid for by Abbott. At the time of the event, the Department of Public Health and its employees were prohibited from accepting a gift valued at more than $25 per occasion. However, each employee who attended this event received a gift valued at $128 for a total of $2,432 for all 19 staffers who attended. We are recommending a penalty here of $2,500 against Dr. Massind for causing these prohibited gifts from a restricted source. Staff support this penalty in part due to the following mitigating factors that are present in this matter. Dr. Massind does not have a history of enforcement matters with the Commission. The violation at issue was an isolated incident There was no evidence that Dr. Masinde personally derived any benefit from the event, and prior to the event, Dr. Masinde was not required to take the annual ethics training, and is now required to do so as part of the changes that took effect with the passage of Proposition D. And Dr. Masinde has since taken the annual ethics training and did so as of March 11th, 2025. And I am available for any questions that commissioners may have.
I do have a few comments and questions. I've started each time, so I'm happy to let anybody else start. Although I will say that my name is misspelled in a signature block. So
I'm sorry, Ms. Chair?
my name is misspelled, my last name.
Is it no? Gosh, darn
That's
it.
okay. Just wanted to flag for everyone. But
Thank you for calling that to my attention, Chair. Apologize.
and also happy to get started with questions if folks need more time. So the summary stated that Dr. Masinde should have known that he wasn't permitted to receive gifts from the restricted source because of the newsletters and an email. I'm wondering if he typically, should have expected to receive information like this important in an HR newsletter or in an email. I just want to better understand why we're putting this burden on this person who didn't have to, take the trainings like we usually do. So,
certainly, the Department of Public Health did send a letter solely speaking to the prohibition of accepting gifts from prohibited sources, such as restricted sources, more than $25 per occasion, and that was something that was separate than a newsletter. We do understand that the newsletters had the information contained sort of within those newsletters, and it may have gone by the wayside with a director of a public lab, as we do have here. He may get voluminous emails, but this one from the Department of Public Health itself was specifically speaking to this prohibition. So he was on notice. He was also very aware that Abbott Laboratories, Inc. was a contractor doing business with his department and actually supplied equipment and supplies that were integral to the public health lab's functioning. So he was very aware that this was a contractor doing business with his department.
okay, thank you. And can you tell me how this came to our attention, this matter specifically? Because it happened two years ago, right?
Yes, the holiday season 2023, and this was an external complaint that the commission received.
That's all from me.
I know that the respondent did not attend the party, but do we have any indication that he never intended to attend the party, or was it just something that happened later, a conflict came up later, and he couldn't attend?
I can't speak to his intentions, Commissioner, but we do know that he was out of the country at the time of the event.
Yeah, so you don't know whether he never intended to attend versus a decision later, he later ultimately did not end up attending.
No, I don't have that information.
Is there any, were there any pending proposals from Abbott Labs at that time to contract with DPH other than the pre-existing contract in 2021 that you're aware of?
There was nothing pending for Dr. Masinde's decision, though he does provide input as to the deliverables that Abbott was providing to the department based upon his knowledge of the activities of the public health lab. But he was not ultimately a decision maker for the contracts that the entity had with his department.
And that input was related to the September 2021 5-year contract?
Correct, yes. That's the equipment and supplies that Abbott provided the public health lab, and it's primarily those input that he would provide regarded like the amount of supplies on hand and if any changes to the contracting process that would affect the amounts of the supplies necessary to meet their needs.
And at the time that this occurred in December 23, you're not aware of any additional attempts by Abbott Labs to enter into new contracts with the department?
We are not, no.
Was this holiday party an annual event, or was this a one-time thing?
This was a one-time event. We don't have any indication that there were vendor-supported holiday parties in the past before this or subsequent to this event either.
And just a quick follow-up to that, because this was supposedly like a continued legal or continued education meeting? Like, is there anything more like that that's continued to happen that's funded with like food sent to the location instead of the restaurant? Because I think there was a distinction here. They were like, let's just move it to the restaurant, even though we typically have it in the location. So has there been anything like that?
No, it is our understanding that the Department of Public Health has made it known within its department that staff are not to engage in these type of events, both externally from staff offices and internally as well. There is indication that previous events, like such as Lunch and Learn, where there's a continuing education unit component involved, were catered by either Department of Public Health or also the vendor giving that Lunch and Learn event. However, this was different from those in the fact that it was external at a restaurant rather than something that was bag lunch, so to speak.
Does at any point, going forward, did Dr. Masende or any of these city employees that attended the holiday lunch have any authority to engage with Abbott in terms of any city contracts or any purchases from Abbott?
No indication, Commissioner, no.
What was the position of the Abbott employee that was engaged in planning this event?
She was the company liaison with the Public Health Lab, and I don't specifically remember exactly her title, but I know for sure that it was a liaison capacity.
Do you know what the responsibilities of such a liaison are?
Not necessarily. The emails that I reviewed pertain to her efforts of scheduling this event and topics for the continuing education component that they discussed but did not do at the event itself.
Do you know if she has any role in contracting?
No, I don't. I couldn't answer that. But I can't say that her name did not, she was not a signer to the contract in question that Commissioner Salahi had referenced.
Looking at page 7 of the of Exhibit A, I was wondering, could you give a little more clarity about the conversations that initiated the holiday party? It's a little unclear to me. It's, it says here, initial discussions about planning the event began in early 2023 when the PHL senior clerk reached out to an employee from Abbott on December 4th to check in, quote, about the holiday lunch with the lab, unquote. So I was wondering, in your investigation and in presumably interviewing folks, when did the genesis of the of this idea first come up, and how?
The genesis appeared to have occurred prior to the email records, and much of the initial planning for it included that the topics for the continuing education component to it, and all pertained to it was the scheduling of the event at the restaurant as well. Part of our emphasis here is to show that it was always the intention for this to be a holiday event, and the idea that the Lunch and Learn component was left by the wayside and was never conveyed to the staffers who attended the event itself.
So that's good to know. I guess my question is, do we know who first proposed it, the holiday lunch? Was it from the Abbott side or the PHL side?
You don't recall at this time, no.
Will any funds be returned to Abbott for this lunch?
No. This financial penalty will be paid to the general fund.
Is there any thought about that in terms of any improper like for the public to see this as being proper and for us to make that look better in terms of returning the money to Abbott?
To piggy off Commissioner Tsai's question, I think at least I think it was in the last meeting there was another similar matter where we expressed some discomfort with what it seems like the penalty was merely just the value that was received, and it's not even going back to the entity that paid it.
Director Matthews, would you like to take this?
Good morning again, Commissioners. I do recall that discussion. Just to speak a little bit to that, here, even though the stipulation does say that each individual who attended, the value to them was $128, it would be less the $25 that they would have been, that would have been acceptable, and so that would bring the total to $19.57. So there is a difference in what we're recommending that respondent be penalized here, but we are also considering all of the mitigating circumstances here. All of the questions that you have asked are definitely helpful, especially like going forward with other investigations. And we'll be mindful of those for sure. But in this case, it appears that this value is more appropriate for Dr. Masinde, considering there was no, again, personal benefit to him. He himself didn't even attend. He did explain that initially he believed that this was a CLE luncheon. He wasn't there, so it's unclear whether that component would have been included if he had been around. So hopefully that helps.
Commissioners have no further questions. We can go to public comment. Thank you.
Chair Flores-Fang checking the queue to see if there's any callers that would like to comment on item 6. And there are no callers in the queue, Chair.
And I'll move after I share a little bit of my thoughts. I think that because of the mitigating factors, but also considering the fact that Dr. Masinde had reason to think or consider that Abbott was a restricted source and had already received a letter specifically, outlining that he should not be receiving funds or gifts from entities like this. I think that the penalty is fine, and I'm happy to move to approve. So that's my motion. I move to approve. I don't know if anybody wants to, I guess, vote on this motion or before they propose another motion, right? It's like this would have to be either seconded and lose, and then another motion brought in.
That's right. And once you second it, you can have further conversation about the motion that's on the table.
Great.
I'll second it.
Call the roll, clerk.
Chair Flores-Fang, on the motion to adopt the proposed stipulation, Commissioner Ye?
Aye.
Commissioner Tsai?
Nay.
Vice Chair Salahi?
Aye.
And Chair Flores-Fang?
Aye.
Chair Flores-Fang, with 3 votes in the affirmative, the motion passes.
Okay, agenda item 6 is now closed. And because we continued item number 7, we're going to move to agenda item 8. And that is the presentation, public hearing, and possible action on the Ethics Commission's budget priorities for the fiscal year of 2027 to 2028, or sorry, 2026 to 2027, and 27 to 28.
Thank you, Chair. Hello, Commissioners. If we could share the slides, thank you. So this presentation is about our upcoming budget process. It's statutorily required that we hold 2 public hearings before we submit our budget proposal. And this is the first of the 2. You probably remember this from last year. So the first one is just a general discussion of budget priorities and what we know so far about the mayor's budget instructions. We don't have a proposal before you today to discuss. That's what the second hearing is for. So today is just to have a more open-ended discussion, see if you have the general thoughts about priorities and direction, then we take that. Could, again, work with any subset of 2 of you between now and then if you would like. Otherwise, we could come back in February with a proposal that basically subsumes all those priorities, and then you could react to it, and then we can change it as needed before we submit it to the mayor's office. So this slide just shows you what those dates are. So obviously the next meeting is February 13th. And then we also have kind of an interim step that's new this year, which is we're going to submit a performance metrics and savings pathways worksheet, which is a new tool that the mayor's office has come up with to help the mayor's budget office understand what departments do and to what extent the mayor's office wants to fund those various functions of each department. So that's basically just an information gathering exercise by the mayor's office. So we'll be submitting that later this month. And then, as always, our budget submission is due February 21st. So we'll have basically the worksheet, then our next meeting, then our submission. So that's kind of the immediate next steps. These are the priorities that we put together, and curious to see if you have thoughts on these, if there are any that we're missing here that we should be looking at, or if you see any of these as being different in your minds. Eager to have that conversation with you, but these are pretty similar from last year. So essentially the first one is about our compliance efforts, making sure that we're adequately informing all of our regulated community about what their obligations are under the law, and that they have every resource available to them if they avail themselves of that. Also our audit function, our enforcement function, our public information systems. Obviously, we're a big transparency agency, so lots of people file forms with us. We make those available to the public. There's a lot of work that goes into that. So that's what that 4th bullet point is talking about. And then our policy work, how we evaluate, strengthen, and refine the city's laws to make sure that they are effective and reasonable rules. And then this is probably a new one from last year, which the second to last bullet talks about our operations division and how we streamline and modernize our operations and support all of the work office-wide. And then lastly, this is just kind of a blanket bullet point, but to make sure that we have adequate staffing across all of those priorities, because we can't do the work if we don't have the professionals here with the skills to do that work. So I think that warrants a standalone strategic priority to maintain adequate staffing. As you know, the city has historically followed a baseline approach to budgeting where they look at what your budget was last year. They bake in certain predetermined increases, sometimes decreases, but for example, changes in employee salaries that are negotiated through MOUs. The city knows what those are, so they bake that into your baseline. So what you can see here is what our FY26 approved budget is, 6.55 million, and then you can see just following the baseline projection what that would be if no changes were made. But as I'll get to in a moment, the mayor's office is asking for a citywide reduction in the general fund budget. So it's unlikely that this baseline projection would actually end up being our budget. This would be if there were no cuts. This slide shows the rough breakdown of our budget, and we are always a very staff-heavy organization. It hovers between 85 and 86% staff. We don't have a lot of programs that contract or grant out money. We really are a team of people doing this work. We have a very limited non-personnel budget, and most of that actually is paid to other departments for them to do work. So if you were to add that 10% to our budget, you could say that 95% of our budget is actually city employees. Most of them are here in our office. Some of them are in other offices. For example, we have a work order with DHR for one FTE. Again, that's a person doing work. Similarly, with the controller's office, we have folks there that support us, and we pay that office for their time. Also, it's worth mentioning the election campaign fund. As you know, this is the fund that funds the city's public financing program. We've talked about this before. The statute does envision an annual appropriation that's based on the number of residents in San Francisco. That appropriation formula has not typically been what the mayor's office and the board use to appropriate funds into that fund. They actually rely on a projection approach where they ask us, what amount do we think we will need for the public financing program in the next election? It's always very difficult to predict how elections are going to play out, which races will be competitive, how many candidates will qualify. We do our best to give that projection to them. That's usually, but not always, what they use as the number. For example, last year there was no appropriation made into the fund. They deemed that there was enough cash in that fund to fund what we were going to need during this current fiscal year. So sometimes that number is zero. Sometimes it's a lot more. I've seen large appropriations, $4 or $5 million into that fund in a given fiscal year budget. So it can fluctuate wildly. And when that is rolled into our overall agency budget, it creates these huge swings, or what appear to be huge swings in our agency's overall budget. So that's why we always ask the mayor's office to focus on our actual operating budget, which excludes the election campaign fund, because that actually shows what our budget for our operations is, and that usually is much more consistent year to year. This is a breakdown of our org chart by division, and this is our org chart actually showing each position. And you can see the two vacancies that we have. One is the engagement and compliance manager role. Although we do have an acting engagement and compliance manager, we have not actually completed the recruitment. It's in progress right now, and hopefully will be done very soon, but it's not done, so that's technically still vacant. And also the backfill for Alvin, who was recruited into the senior IS engineer position. I think I announced that to you in the ED report. He's here today. Congrats, Alvin.
Congrats, Alvin.
He's doing great work. But his former position is now vacant. I'll get to it in a moment, but vacancies, as always, are something that the mayor's office is focused on in their budget. But these are not vacancies that have been sitting here for a long time. Alvin only very recently vacated that position, and similarly, our recently former engagement and compliance manager only left within the last couple of months. So these are not positions that are just sitting vacant in our org chart that we're not using. So we're certainly going to be asking the mayor's office to let us fill those, that those are not unneeded vacant positions. Those are actually very core positions that are important for our work. And then I will just draw your attention to the very bottom of the enforcement column. There's a investigator position shown in red. So that actually is a position we have historically held vacant to meet our attrition savings. As you remember, last year, the mayor's office deleted all of the positions that we had been holding vacant to meet attrition, and they lowered our attrition target to match that. So you could think of that as leaving us in effectively the same net position, where we didn't have these positions to hold vacant, but we also didn't have to meet the same attrition target. So in theory, we came out kind of even on that. But they did not want to eliminate that enforcement position. They thought, even if we were going to continue to hold it open to meet attrition targets, best to not cut even a vacant investigator position. That was how important our enforcement function was to the mayor's office. So that's why that and only that position remains there as a permanently vacant attrition target position. So now we'll get into the instructions that we've been given for this year's budget process. This slide shows the priorities that the mayor's office has for the city and also for the budget. I won't go through all of them. The first one is really what I think applies directly to our office, which is effective common sense government. I I know that the mayor holds ethics to be a priority, something that he definitely campaigned on. I've spoken to him directly. I know this is something that matters to him a lot. And I think that that bullet point encapsulates that priority for him, that effective and common sense government would also include government that is free from conflicts of interest, undue influence, inappropriate gifts, those kinds of things, and that the Ethics Commission is here to make sure that the whole city organization is following those rules and not subjecting the city to those kinds of ineffective or untoward activities. Certainly the case we'll be making in our budget proposal. The actual instructions that the mayor's office gave, unlike prior years, did not include a specific percent target that we need to meet. There is, and I'll get to this in the next slide, there is a target citywide, a dollar number that the mayor's office wants to meet in terms of a reduction in the budget. But they have not taken the approach of saying that every department needs to take the exact same percent cut. They're going to take a little bit more of a hands-on approach. This is part of what that worksheet that I mentioned is all about. That's the information that they're going to need in order to make a more tailored cut to each department that reflects what they think are, how the department is serving the mayor's priorities, where savings can be found, et cetera. So that's going to be a little bit more interactive process this year, I think. So they have iterated, though, some of the main tenets of their approach, and that's what this slide is. So they want to eliminate discretionary programs. We don't have a lot of programs here that are really discretionary. A lot of what we do is directly required in the charter and in statute. We will certainly continue to look, as we always are, at whether there are programs that we could roll back. We're already doing that with, for example, the ordinance you approved a few months ago to roll back some of the disclosures for campaign consultants, major developers, people running for trustee board membership. That's a really good example of this commission already doing this kind of work. We're already trying to be really efficient and not spend the city's resources on programs that aren't really carrying their weight policy-wise. So I feel like we're in a really strong position on that one already, that we've already done this work to a large extent. On the second one, I already touched on this when we were looking at the org chart. It is not going to be a sustainable or workable approach for us to just eliminate positions that happen to be vacant at this moment. We just can't do that. Those are core positions. So that's not something we're going to be able to do. I think for larger departments that may work when they have hundreds of employees and maybe dozens of positions that are all classed the same, and perhaps 10% of them happen to be vacant at the time. I think they can just not fund those, and they can shift work. They can shift positions around. We just simply don't have that flexibility as a tiny, tiny department. So this will be a hard model for us to follow. So I'll definitely be looking for something with the mayor's office that does not do that. On the third and fourth bullet points, this has to do with how our department spends the money that's not staff salaries. So we will definitely take a close look at our contracted services, non-personnel expenditures. It's a tiny slice of our budget. I want to say it's 3%, 4%. There's not a ton to cut there, but we'll certainly, as always, take a look and see if there's any possible way we can realize some savings. And similarly with our work orders, it's about 10% of our budget. We'll definitely be taking a look at that and seeing if there's any way that we can get done what we need to get done, but perhaps reducing those work orders a bit. So that'll be done in conversation with the mayor's office, but also with those other departments that we have those work orders with. The next instruction item is to identify redundancy and shared administrative needs. I think that really ties into the work orders. The city is looking for ways to realize some efficiency savings by having some departments do more things centrally. So I'll be open to having those conversations and seeing if there are things that we can centralize or perhaps share costs or share work with other departments. Absolutely open to that. Would want to really gather information and bring that to you in the form of our budget proposal. But yeah, definitely would be curious to see what the mayor's office and other departments are envisioning on that. And lastly, the mayor's office has encouraged departments to identify investment opportunities to reduce long-term costs. I think that probably is geared more towards capital improvements, departments that have large fleets of vehicles or infrastructure or things like that that are very costly to maintain, that maybe they could replace or perhaps switch to EVs or something like that. I think that's more of what they're thinking, but I think that's something we can absolutely look at too and see if maybe there are some systems upgrades to our disclosure systems or other things like that. We don't have a lot of capital. We have basically software, but we could certainly look at that and see if perhaps there could be some changes that might cost us now, but in the future might reduce our licensing fees or something like that. We'd absolutely look for those kinds of savings. So I think these instructions, as I have digested them and heard them presented to me, I think they seem like things we can engage on, with probably the exception of just cutting vacancies. I think that one is just not something we can really do. But I think on all the other points, we can certainly work with the mayor's office and hopefully be a team player, work with them, try and find some savings. But obviously, I can go to the next slide. If they're trying to cut $400 million from the budget, we're going to be pretty limited in what we can offer up. I think it would be meaningful to try and find some savings that we can contribute to this larger project that's before the mayor's office. It's a really tough budget year. They're in a really tough situation. I think we can definitely help be part of that solution, but also kind of recognize a very tiny slice of the operating or general fund, rather, that our budget comprises. So just to circle back on the process, so we'll be back before you again next month with a proposal to talk through. Glad to work with any of you between now and then if you'd like. Definitely want to hear your thoughts now as well. And then once we submit our budget on the 21st, then there's the mayor phase of the budget, where I think we'll continue to be working with them, hopefully closely, talking about that worksheet, talking about our proposal, getting their thoughts on it, maybe exploring some of those shared service model opportunities, like work orders, if that's what folks are looking at. And then ultimately by June 1st, then the mayor submits the mayor's budget to the board, then the board phase kicks off, and then the board has the months of June and July to pass a balanced budget and goes to the mayor for signature. And I think in our experience, it's really been the month of June when we're interacting with the board a lot. That's when we have our one or two proposal or hearings rather before the board's budget committee. That's usually second or third week of June. All departments come and just give a very brief presentation about their budget. And then if the board identifies you for a BLA review, Budget Legislative Analyst Review, then you come back for the second round of hearings, which is usually a week or two after that, which we did last year. You probably remember. So I didn't put that on here, but that's essentially when we would be doing that, would be toward the end of June. And again, depending on how things go, there could be another opportunity for you to engage at that point. But I would definitely keep you updated and let you know when those opportunities might be. So I think that's all I've got for you today. Glad to answer any questions about this, and definitely eager to get your thoughts and just hear where you are on this right now.
I thought that was very informative. I think what you propose makes sense. I think that for filling out, that form that the mayor is interested in, I do agree that we probably have a lot of that information because of the way the staff has been tracking, our priorities and our goals. And so I do think that we're well positioned to engage and to negotiate as best we can. But I thought that was informative. I have no other comments.
I agree. Thank you very much. And I completely agree with the approach that you're taking.
Great. Public comment. No one in the room. Maybe you could check the queue, clerk.
Chair checking the queue to see if there are any callers to comment on item 8. And there are no callers in the queue.
Okay. We do not have, there was no motion, so I'm just going to close this item. Let's call agenda item 9, discussion and possible action on items for future meetings. Does any commissioner have anything to offer for this item? Okay. Opening it up to public comment. Anyone in the room? General public comment for possible action on items for future meetings.
Checking the queue one more time to see if anybody is calling for item 9. And there are no callers.
Great. Agenda item 9 is now closed, and I call agenda item 10. This is an additional opportunity for general public comment. Does anybody in the room wish to offer public comment?
So I want to thank you for responding to us, and particularly, I'm a little nearsighted. Are you Kevin Ye?
Right.
Thank you so much for your judgment and in voting no, and the honesty, and for the fairness of it, and the courage it took, I think, just to vote what I think is the only way on this issue about the behested payments. For the others of you, I believe in the benefit of the doubt. I don't know you, you don't know me. I assume you all meant to do well. I advise you to get better advisors when you're making judgments about anything to do with fair elections. There are many groups. There's Common Cause, the League of Women Voters, Indivisible, and the California Clean Money Campaign that have been actively involved in efforts to protect our electoral process and our democracy for years. You need to talk to them, people like Stephen Hill. You need to bring them in to advise you when you are talking about making changes, because they know what they're talking about. They know the impacts of things. Listen to people from the public. I'm an elderly person. I have probably at least 3 or 4 times as much experience as you do as an adult. The brain does not become fully an adult until sometime between 25 and 32. Before that, you have an adolescent, which is nearly a child's brain. So those of us who have been adults for a long time and are not cognitively impaired, we have a lot of experience to draw from. And when we tell you, red flag warning, you're going off a cliff, you better pause and listen to us. That's number one. The people who really have been immersed in these issues for a long time, you really need to listen to them, because they know human behavior and what's going to happen when you give opportunities for corruption. They will be embraced. They always have been in human history, and they always will be. So your job is to protect against that. And I hope that you will use better judgment in the future. I do believe you meant the best intentions, but your judgment was very flawed. So thank you again. I hope never to have to come here again. Truly, not that I don't find you all charming and wonderful, but I truly have better things to do with my life and other things I need to do with my life. But this is important. I will be one of those people who will be here trying to make sure that the blessings of democracy are passed on to my children and grandchildren. I take it very seriously. And think about, I've been at the No King's Day things, I'll be there again. And if you've heard of the analogy with the frog in the water, you put a frog in water, in cold water, and you turn the heat on, and let it gradually rise. The frog dies before it even knows it's in danger. That's where democracy is. And that's where we finally made some efforts to deal with some of the graft and corruption with Prop E and these kinds of restrictions, and now they're chipping away. That's the increase in temperature. We need to stop it, and that's your job. So thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Chair Flores Fain looking at the queue to see if there's anyone to comment on additional public comment. And there are no callers in the queue, Chair.
Thank you.
Can I say something?
I appreciate all the robust public comment at this meeting as well as every other meeting. I know it takes a lot for citizens to come and out of their busy days, lives, to come and participate in this, and I really appreciate it. I also want to say that I have complete confidence in the good faith, judgment, competence, and abilities of both my fellow commissioners and the commission staff.
Thank you. There's seeing nobody else here in the room wishing to speak and nobody else in the queue, going to close agenda item 10. And I call agenda item 11, which is adjournment. Thank you. This concludes the January 9th, 2026 meeting of the San Francisco Ethics Commission.